happy to greet you here today to hear Ron Windingstad talk about the Chimney Swift. And he's had decades and decades of experience about Chimney Swifts with Minnesota Audubon. He's also taught Eagle Scouts for decades about how to construct the houses, and all in an effort to help them maintain their numbers or increase their numbers. I don't believe, Ron, that they're endangered necessarily.
Not yet.
But they are in a declining mode at this point. So it was interesting how we ran into each other. About 7 years ago, we got the idea to do a Chimney Swift tower, and Ron was part of it, the process at that time. And unfortunately, it ended up, not because of his, not because of his problem, but because of ours, it ended up under some trees where the Chimney Swifts are never going to go down. So it sat there for 6 or 7 years. So we got the idea to rejuvenate it, to bring the house from where it was out to this spot out here. And we got a hold of Ron after the years that have gone by. He was nice enough to come down and go out there and look at the place we were thinking about and say this is a place that it should be. So with that, Ron is a true expert on this. He loves to teach. I know he would like to teach children particularly you have an interest in. But so Ron, go ahead, take the...
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm glad you took the time to come and learn a little bit about this amazing bird, the Chimney Swift. As you can see, and why it has a nickname of the flying cigar. It's indeed shaped like a cigar, and it's extremely fast. Unfortunately, though, in just my lifetime, they've declined by over 70%. It's probably closer to 80% now. And the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, has listed them now as vulnerable. The next step after vulnerable is endangered, and then after that, extinction. So they are very vulnerable, and I'll tell you some of the reasons why during this presentation. Most people, when they see Chimney Swifts, they say, look at all those bats. Why are you watching all those bats? When in fact it's quite normal, because they do congregate, especially in the evenings. But in the evenings, bats would be leaving their roost sites, whereas with the Chimney Swifts, they are just coming in to roost for the night. They belong to the family Apodidae, which means without feet. And part of the reason is, if you look at them, they have really very, very tiny feet, but actually they do have feet. The other name for them, the genus Chatura, means in Latin spine-tailed. And it's with these spines on these tails, feathers, and the sharp claws that allow them to cling onto rough surfaces. And you might watch for them too, flying around within a group of swallows. Oftentimes they'll mix in with swallows as they go around collecting insects. They are not a very small bird, they're bigger than a hummingbird, but as you can see, they're around 5 inches in length, but they have a 12-inch wingspan. And they weigh about as much as a slice of whole wheat bread. So they're hollow bones, and it makes them very adept at flying long distances. They are unable to perch like other birds, like robins or blue jays or sparrows. So they have to have something rough to cling on to. They spend all the day in the air when the weather's like this, probably not yesterday, as several of the other days, but they are very fine insect eaters, and they feed exclusively on flying insects, so they're excellent mosquito control agents, and they are among the fastest flyers in the bird world. generally from late April, early May, until about this time of year, September, when they start thinking about going south, like many of us do. And they go down to Brazil, Chile, Peru. Matter of fact, it was in Peru when a missionary first learned that the Swiss were down there using the forest, when he came across a tribesman that had a necklace made of bands, leg bands from Chimney Swifts. So I'm not sure what they were doing with the Swifts, but they had collected a number of them. They aren't real prolific. They produce 3 to 4 eggs each spring. It takes them about 3 weeks in order for them to incubate. And once they hatch, they'll grow really fast. And one of the things about the Swifts is it's not just the female that sits on the nest, but both the male and the female. And when it comes time to feeding them, they often have several helpers. So instead of just the pair, they'll probably have 2 or 3 others, whether or not those are siblings from the previous year, or whether they just unmated Swifts that help out. But they do grow really fast because they are fed insects throughout their nesting time. You can see on this particular Chimney Swift how swollen that throat is. That's full of insects. They eat hundreds and hundreds of insects, and again, they love mosquitoes. After about 3 weeks, they start learning to fly in the chimney itself. They'll just leave the nest and go a little ways, and they'll spend a few days going up and down the chimney before they actually leave the nest. Historically, they nested in hollow trees, and now that all the older trees are pretty much gone, they adapted to the chimneys in cabins. And so when cabins were being built throughout the prairies of eastern U.S., they adapted to those chimneys, and so they were actually able to expand their range. Their range goes as far as about the Mississippi River. No, it goes as far as the Rocky Mountains. But there's other Swift species. There's 3 other species of Swift in western North America, and they kind of take over where the Chimney Swift leaves off. But you might ask, well, what do the Swifts do when they are using a chimney and people turn on their furnaces or they start fires in there? Actually, by the time fall rolls around, like they say about this time of year, when factories or people might be using their chimneys, they will indeed start migrating south. Many of you may recognize Fort Snelling. This was, up until about 8 years ago, this was a real popular place to watch Chimney Swifts roost, especially they would also nest there, but then by the hundreds they'd roost there during fall migration. Now, unfortunately, those chimneys have been capped, and so they're no longer available to Swifts. And other places like this, I believe it's a cheese factory with a nice tall chimney. Again, very popular place for Chimney Swifts to use. Again, this school, very popular place in the past, and I'm not sure if it still is or not, because many of the schools have been tearing down their chimneys. But now the Swifts are really facing problems. It's not only have these old factories shut down or been demolished, or the chimneys have been demolished, but also individual houses or schools are capping their chimneys, not allowing the Swifts to use it. And modern construction now has metal pipes for exhaust versus the old brick chimney. But the Swifts have learned to adapt. This one house, for example, has been capped to a sort, but it has the tile parts going down. And the Swifts have learned to use this particular section of those chimneys right in here. So even though it's got a blue lining, they're able to cling to the bricks here. And the dampener is closed, which makes sense to keep the Swifts from coming in. But one of the things, as Jim mentioned, started working building artificial towers. And I'll talk a little bit about the people that initiated that many years ago down in Texas. But these artificial towers serve as a good nesting habitat, where this particular school in St. Paul Park, they were tearing down the chimney, but Krause Anderson was kind enough to replace that with an artificial chimney, even though it doesn't hold the hundreds that the original chimney Swifts did. They still are available for use. One of the things about the towers is generally they're 12 feet tall. That's the best kind. There's also some models that are 8 foot or whatever. But the towers consist of 12 feet, and the inside is rough cedar, so that the Swifts have something to cling on to. And because, like I said, they have to have something rough to cling on to. But they're 12 feet tall, and here in the north, I generally recommend that there's a thin layer of insulation just for the really cold nights. And then they have a board in the bottom with holes that are drilled in, and it's something that you would want to do here once the Swifts start using the tower, is to remove that every fall or early spring because of nesting material that might fall down and block those vent holes. It's got the top is reduced, it has a relatively narrow opening, but these towers, and it might caution you, we've had Swifts using a tower the following day that it was installed, but we've also had some that have taken like 8 or 10 years. That's not very common. Usually it is maybe 3 or 4 years, depending on the location and Swifts nearby. But the Swifts will go in there and they'll not only nest, but they'll go in there to roost. And even though a pair might be nesting there, they do allow other Swifts to use it. Here's another one of Krause Anderson's project. The school wanted the existing brick chimney removed and modified, and so an artificial tower was put up. And this is one that got used the first year to put it up in early spring, the time for the Swifts to come in. And in that case, there already were Swifts that had nested at that school in years past. So when they came back, the chimney might have been gone, but the tower was available. And so they've been nesting there for years. Jim mentioned that we've been working with Scouts, primary Eagle Scouts, Boy Scouts for the Eagle Scout project. And any of you that might have a young person in your life that is a Scout, these make fantastic Eagle Scout projects, and we really never had much of a problem finding funding for these Scouts, or getting discounts at Home Depot or Menards, but it's a fairly vigorous project. The base, the first 4 feet of the tower is angle iron, attached to angle iron, and then concrete poured around it to stabilize it. And then it just continues to go up 4 feet, 8 foot, and then 12 feet. And the insulation is laid on, and then the exterior, usually vinyl. And many of you might know this, but Prescott Middle School here has a tower that the shop class, Jason Bazell and his cohorts, his companions there at Prescott Middle School, built this artificial tower. I went by there a couple of weeks ago when I was down there. There were a couple of Swifts flying around. I'm not sure if they are using it yet or not. And thank John for the photo. A friend of mine, he's kind of a crazy guy, but he has built 6 of these towers in his property alone. And again, this spring, every one of the towers was used. So private individuals can also get involved. And a lumber company up in near Forest Lake built one and made it kind of like a log cabin. And this one I like to, from my Nordic ancestors, the good white and red tower up again south of Forest Lake. The Mille Lacs band of Ojibwe has really gotten involved with Chimney Swifts as well as purple martins and other species. But this is at a golf course up at, I forget the name of the city, but it's a golf course on Mille Lacs property where they've built a kiosk around it in order to talk about the Swifts, but also to talk about the golf course itself. And this is a product of several Eagle Scout projects. One scout built the gazebo, another scout built some benches, and then they erected a tower right next to it. That's up in Wyoming, Minnesota. And a couple of individuals have gotten creative and attached towers to an existing building. The people that really started the Chimney Swift movement, Chimney Swift conservation movement, of Paul and Georgianne Kyle. For those of you that might be interested, they've written a couple of books, one about Chimney Swifts itself, but another one about how to build these Chimney Swift towers. And it's a great book. It gives you step-by-step instructions on how to do it. So if there are any of you that want to build it privately, or if you know some scouts or some organizations that might like to do that, that book is available on how to do it. They have been doing this for years and years, and it was actually them that kind of got the Chimney Swift conservation movement started. And I was working for Audubon, Minnesota at the time, so kind of dovetailed and worked with them as to how to build the towers, where to put them. Went down and visited them and got all their insights. They have these 2 towers attached to their house, and these are big towers, bigger than the average chimney. And they have video cameras in there, and they have 12 additional towers on their property. It's actually, they gave the property to Austin Audubon Society, but they have, like I said, a dozen other towers, and each one of them is now occupied. But again, a couple of towers, for whatever reason, took a number of years before they got used. But these folks have a website, chimneyswifts.org. If you want to check them out, you can order their books through them. And one of the things that helped, I believe, is we started playing the call of the Chimney Swift during the day in the spring when the Swifts first came back, and playing this tape of the calls of the Chimney Swifts, I believe really helped draw them in a little faster. One of my fondest memories is we were dedicating a Chimney Swift tower in one of the Minneapolis parks, and one of the board members was there, and we were dedicating this tower at this park, and while we were dedicating it, 2 Swifts came by almost like in formation, thanking us, I guess, for putting that there, and that got used, like another one that got used immediately. So There's still a lot that we don't know about chimney swifts, but one thing we do know that we need to make people aware of their plight and how rapidly they are declining. So one of the things we did when I was with Audubon is we have Chimney Swift Sits throughout the state, and some in Iowa, because Iowa doesn't have a state Audubon office. But these Chimney Swift Sits, and we had a number of them in Hastings, where we watched usually over 100 plus swifts going in at the courthouse downtown, and they are getting ready to leave. So if you wanted to, I don't know if they're still using it. I know the chimney has not been capped, so they could well be using it. But that was a great way to teach people and raise awareness of the swifts, because again, people could be watching swifts for years and years, and many times I heard, why are they watching the bats, you know? But like I say, it's a different combination of when they use a chimney or not. The other thing that the Chimney Swift Sit did is they documents different chimneys that are being used by swifts, and it gives people a reason to protect that particular chimney. More than once I've given talks at churches or wherever, and people said they were contemplating tearing down that chimney or capping it, and had a couple of astute individuals, well, those aren't bats, those are swifts. And so they asked me to come over and give a talk, and once they learned there were swifts, they no longer needed to cap the swifts out of the chimneys. Once in a while a squirrel could get in or whatever, I imagine, but it's worth it when it can save some habitat for the swifts. And the Chimney Swift Sit, sometimes there would be just a couple of people like this, but again, young people, just those that like birds or those that don't know much about them, find it really exciting to see these birds go in. And after the talk, I'll show a few seconds of swifts going into a tower, into a chimney, and it really is something to see. But we can also have a large number of people. This was at a talk I gave down in Kelowna, Iowa, at a senior citizens residence, and kind of had a captive audience, but they brought families with, and there were several hundred people there that, again, many of these residents and employees had worked at that facility for years and always just thought they were bats, which many of them thought that were interesting. But watching these swifts go in, again with the video later on, you'll see how amazing it is. But with that Chimney Swift Sit, we'd have Chimney Swift, and we'd count the swifts going in. Everybody likes to count. And so here it's pretty easy, 1, 2, 3 maybe. But here it starts to get a little bit more complicated. You might go 1, 2, 3, and then you go 5, 10, 15, 25, 50, 100. And not that it's totally accurate, but it gives us rough estimates from year to year. A couple of the other things that the swifts did is that people would get interested and they'd start watching different chimneys. And this little chimney only was like 1.5 feet above the roof, but they were able to raise a pair and 2 young in there. In this school here, Aquila Primary Center in St. Louis Park. This wasn't during the sit, but I was fortunate working with Sven Sundgaard from Gary Levin. At that time he had a Simply Science program, and he and his photographer, I suggested they come up there and see what we see. In that case it was over 2,000. I estimated closer to 2,500, but it could have been 1,800, or it could have been 2,800, I'm not sure, but it was a bunch. And so that was a wonderful way to educate through Carrie Levin TV with his Simply Science program about the plight of the Swiss. Here's another one that, again, like I said, I was kind of surprised initially. I didn't think Swiss would be in it because of those flue tiles, but there was a pair there, plus some young and some others. This is an interesting school, and John was telling me, being from Le Sueur, the St. Anne School down in Le Sueur. This is a nice sized chimney, and we've gotten some real good data from playing some retired individuals. The husband was a elementary school principal, and the wife was a teacher, but they've been going to that school for years, and they'll go there for 45, 50 days when the Swiss start congregating in the fall, and count them. So you can see how they fluctuate. In August, there was a peak, and then it started going down, and then by the mid-September, they started peeling off and going south. But you can see that it fluctuated from day to day. But this is some real good information, and this is quite old, probably about 8-10 years old. I haven't gotten their information lately, but again, this is the time of year that they are migrating. So again, I would chance it if I were you and take a run down to Hastings and go to that courthouse right about sunset or a little after dusk, because it really is amazing to watch. I might just throw in here too, many of you are already aware of this, that native plantings are just a really boon for insects, in which so many birds rely on. As I mentioned, for like here, I think that's a Veda Corporation, but with the native plantings around there, there's plenty of insects, plenty of mosquitoes, and again, this is what a normal Chimney Swift's throat would look like, but when it comes back with insects, it's kind of like I am after I've been to McDonald's. But again, you're never too young to begin to enjoy and help conserve birds. This is my son, who's now a junior at St. Thomas, but he still loves watching the Swifts, and his hearing is much better than mine, so he can hear the tweets where it's a range above mine. Although I am going to get hearing aids next month so I can hear the Swifts, but they'll be gone by then. So you're never too young, nor are you really too old. And the Swifts really need our help. And I was born in 1944, and like I said, this is probably closer now to 80% of the Chimney Swifts have declined. Although in this video later on, it won't look like it because there are thousands of them. But that's in Raleigh, North Carolina during migration. So they really jumped up there. So the Swifts have declined. I believe each one of us can in one way or the other help reverse the trend. Whether it's just like having this tower out here, people are going to say, what the heck is that? Gives you an opportunity to talk about the Swifts. I know people really appreciate learning about that and how together we can really make a difference. Before I entertain any questions, if we could see that video right now. And as I mentioned, that's in the video was taken down in Raleigh, North Carolina a number of years ago. So there are a lot of Swifts, and even though the video runs for a couple, 3 minutes, it just kind of keeps repeating itself. So we'll just show the first 30 seconds or 40 seconds of it. moving in, they'll start out slow, like I say, counting them by 2s and 5s and 10s, and afterwards they'll peak up to hundreds and hundreds of them, and then at the end, very last ones to come in, I believe, are teenagers coming in for the night because they're the last ones to come in. But you can just see how amazing that is to watch those swifts going in, and you try to count them, but you can see it's more like 10s or 20s or 50s or whatever. So a little girl like to see those?
She likes them.
Yeah, that's what's fun to watch, is when you get young people out there especially. But even some of us older folks who just, just amazing. No one can sit there and not count them, it seems like. Everybody's growing the counting. Okay, well, I'll be happy to entertain some questions now. I'm asking Emily to run this because I'm electronically challenged.
Just make it quiet.
First of all, you don't have to go to Hastings to see it because we have a population that roosts in the UCC church here in town.
Oh, is that by the middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remembered that. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I've counted, 130 or more.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I forgot all about that, but I remembered when we were putting up that tower over there, Jason thought it would be a good place for the tower because of the churches.
I don't know if any have used that tower by the school.
Somebody, Jason texted me a few days ago, said that they've, and I saw some use flying around there, but I haven't been watching it to see if they're going in or not. But one way to check is to take that bottom panel off, that air, with the air holes, and see if there's nesting material or eggshells. But don't give up hope on that yet.
I spent several evenings there after we put up the tower playing the song.
Okay.
And I did see a couple go in, but they came right back out.
Okay.
So I haven't heard or seen anything since.
How long ago was it? Oh, right when you put up the tower, so a number of years ago. But yeah, don't give up hope. Other questions?
You want to put up bathhouses also? Is there?
Definitely.
Where those might be positioned?
Definitely encourage people putting up bathhouses, but I would not suggest attaching it to the tower itself, someplace either on a separate pole or to the side of a building. When I lived in Cottage Grove, we had bathhouses attached to the house, and they'd get used, but definitely any artificial type housing that you can put up is beneficial for birds because of the habitat loss. And anything you can do for as far as avoiding using chemicals or promoting flowering plants for the butterflies or the bees or other insects. Everything needs our help these days.
When they migrate south, do they have towers down there as well?
Not that I'm aware of. I spend quite a bit of time now that I'm retired in the winters down central Mexico. But the birds, first of all, they would actually have gone through the east side of Mexico by the time I got there. They still, as far as I know, down on the wintering grounds, there's still sufficient habitat for them to roost in trees and stuff. But if the swifts get caught in a storm, for example, and they don't have a chimney to go into or whatever, I should have included a picture of that because it's really something to see. But they'll cling to the side of a tree or a rough surface, and they'll just pile on top of each other, probably for heat preservation. But if there's no place else to go, they will congregate out in the open out of a chimney or whatever to survive a rainstorm.
Our tower out here is getting a little seedy looking. Does it need staining or anything like that?
That's purely an aesthetic thing, I guess. But yeah, and most of the towers we put up are like this one, light colored, simply just to keep the heat in for when they nest in the evenings. Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that about the church. That's exciting. Did everybody hear that and know where that church is? Because they still could be using that. So again, the best time to go is just like right at sunset and bring some lawn chairs or blankets to sit on the grass and watch them come in. Thanks for that.
Sit in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the nesting? How many nests per tower? How many?
Oh, good question. One. They'll only, pair will only allow, won't allow any others to nest there, but they will allow other swifts to roost in there, to use it. But they collect their twigs for the nest because they spend, as I mentioned, all day flying. They can't perch, so they'll go by a bush or the tip of a branch and break off little twigs, and then they'll use the saliva to attach those twigs to the bricks or the rough wood. And I'm not sure if those nests, it's Swift's nests that are used for nest soup, but I know some of the birds' nests are used for soups in the Peoria community. But that's a good question.
Do they reuse the nest?
Do they reuse it?
Or does it have to be cleaned out?
No, usually after a year, after one season's use, they'll fall down to the bottom, and that's why it's kind of important to clean out the bottom of a tower or the chimney flue. But they usually build new ones every year. But I shouldn't say that so firmly. I guess it'd be fair to say I'm not really sure. But my experience has been that they build them.
Do they have just one nest a year?
What's that? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you have 100 swifts in one chimney and only one is nesting and they have 4 to 6 eggs, how are they going to repopulate?
Yeah, that's a good question. The problem why they decline, and there just isn't enough habitat. Like I'm sure 20 years ago you would not have seen that many swifts using a single chimney because there'd be so many others around. But now they're forced to congregate like that. And the estimate is that every year the population is declining by 2.5%. So when you're already down to 70%, it's still declining, and it'll probably decline even faster.
As I understand it, that couple out in California were the first ones to ban chimney swifts.
I'm not sure. Back in the 40s, there was a group in Wisconsin at the University of Madison that was banning them. I think it was at least back in the 50s.
But nobody knew where they spent their winters at that time, did they?
Right.
Until they saw the necklaces.
And, you know, like on purple martins and everything now, we're able to track their movements with telemetry or radios. But the swifts just are too small or too light. And the martins are being able to track them because it measures the amount of daylight, the amount of sunlight. Whereas with the swifts, they spend so much time in the chimneys of the trees down there. It's hard.
Do they fly out at sunrise then, or how do they?
They generally leave starting at sunrise. If they don't leave the same manner that they arrive, they'll go out in smaller groups. I don't know if you've been to the church in the mornings or seen that, but generally, according to the Kyles and others that have the videos and everything, they'll just gradually leave a few at a time instead of en masse.
Do you have any idea on how far away a bat brewery should be from a Chimney Swift?
I don't. Talking with others involved in Swifts, can't say for sure if that would be a problem attaching it to the tower or not, but that's the case. It better be safe than sorry.
Will they cohabitate in a tower?
That has not been documented, but it's not to say that they're meant. Yes.
I heard you mention that some of the chimneys have been capped. If they're left uncapped, how much of a nuisance is it to a homeowner to have a swift or swifts nesting? Does it really have any impact?
As long as you keep your flue closed. Otherwise, if the flue is open, the swifts could get into the house. Not that they'd cause any damage, but it could be harmful to the young swifts. But I have a close friend that they've had, I didn't show a photo of their house, but they've had swifts in their chimneys for 12 years now, and they've never had any problem.
Have you ever seen them using old silo?
Yes. That's another good point. I have seen them use old silos in a couple of places, including one south of Cottage Grove. There's an old silo that stands down between that and the island to the south, and those seen swifts going in there. So that's another thing, if you have silos or whatever it is.
If they use a silo, what would they use just a barn then? That had like an old barn, you know, like kind of diameter.
They've actually been able to get into old houses that the windows have been broken out or whatever, and they've been found to be nesting in those old houses.
So what is the basic habitat requirements that they're looking for if they would go into an old house? Because the tower is, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're open at the top, right? Totally
Right.
open.
Yeah.
So are they just looking for safe, like cover, safety?
Basically, something that's over their heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he said there's been cases of them documented nesting in old houses. And there could have been a chimney there or not, but even if just the windows was broken or something like that, they could get in and the door was left open.
Do they nest in caves?
Not that I'm aware of. I know there's worldwide, there's almost 100 different species of Swiss. So I don't see why they wouldn't, but I've never heard of that being documented, as long as it's a rough surface and stuff. And John, we were talking earlier about the sandhill cranes or the bald eagles and how they're adapted. In the mid-1940s, although Leopold recommended estimated that there were maybe 30 pairs of sandhill cranes in Wisconsin. Now there's probably 3,000 pairs or more in Wisconsin, primarily because they've learned to adapt. Historically, they would not nest within sight of a building or within sight of a people. Now you can find sandhill cranes next to a cold store down in Madison, for example, and they really adapted. And John was telling me about south of here where there's some cranes that are starting to congregate and roost, especially during migration. Yes.
When I was a kid, eagles were shot as chicken hawks. And you couldn't get within a half a mile of one.
Right.
And now, I'm down on the river and there's 14 in the tree over my head.
Yeah.
They have learned that we no longer are shooting them and they're not afraid of us.
Exactly.
But they're intelligent birds.
Yeah. It's, and again, I think we can credit much of their success not only to being able to adapt, but the disbanding of the use of DDT, where the chemicals would cause the eggshells to thin, and so when an eagle would sit on it, it would crush the egg. But now with that chemical not being used, I think it's DDT, I'm not sure which one.
It was DDT.
It is, thank you. But they made an amazing comeback too. And I guess there's nothing to say, and we can always hope that maybe the Chimney Swifts will adapt and we'll be able to build their nests someplace else. But until then, we need to give them all the help we can get.
That number that was so fluctuating up and down in August and September, was that due just to the migration and then that place getting maybe some more northern birds that are stopping over for the night and leaving right away, or is there any specific reason for that?
That's exactly right. It's a good point. The swifts will come in at different times and they'll leave at different times. So for whatever reason, maybe that big peak number was at a period where the weather, the birds were stocked in, for example, or maybe they just decided to stay a little longer for whatever reason. But yeah, they will be leaving and coming back. And the swifts will range quite a ways away from their roost site. They'll, it's not uncommon to see swifts, a number of miles from the known roost site. They even drink the water, and sometimes you'll see them skimming a pond. You've probably seen like swallows do that too. They'll fly over a pond or the edge of a lake and drink their water. How they mate, no one really knows yet.
We put ours in late, this summer, as you know. But when are they more likely to come, in the spring? If they're going to come at all, would it normally be in the spring, or could it be any time spring,
Generally
summer?
by the end of April, they start arriving. And again, if you go on chimneyswifts.org with Paul and Georgia and Kyle, they announce daily almost where swifts have been sighted, like when they first arrived in South Texas, or when they arrive in Tennessee, or when they arrive in Iowa or Minnesota, and so you can kind of anticipate them showing up. But it's usually by early May they are here. Good questions.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time, Ron.